So the college football, what are they called? They're called the College Football Playoff Management Committee, and they met recently in Dallas. And so that is a group of 10. It's the 10 FBS conference commissioners, and for the Pac-12, who does still get a place at the table here, they were represented by Teresa Gould. Gould. I don't know, however you pronounce it. She's the one that they appointed when they kicked Kliavkov out of there.
Right.
Also, the Notre Dame AD is on the committee. And what they were doing is they were mainly taking a look at all the logistics of a new expanded playoff, all the travel and the dates and everything. And so I was reading up on what they were talking about, and a lot of it was minutia. But the one thing that stood out was they simulated the college football playoff into a 12-team format based off of the final rankings from 2022. Okay, so this is the year TCU beat Michigan and lost to Georgia in the final. But it's the 2022 final rankings with a twist because they used 2024 conference affiliations. So that would mean that Utah, for example, would have been in the Big 12. Okay, Texas in the SEC, and so on. So only the top 4 highest-ranked conference champions get buys in the 12-team field.
Mm-hmm.
So what they were saying was when they simulated this, number 3 TCU and number 4 Ohio State were bumped out of the top 4. In their place was number 7 Clemson, who jumped to number 3, and number 8, Utah, who jumped to number 4, because remember, Utah in this scenario would be the Big 12 champion. Now, this is going to make internet's collective head explode. And it's not something we've thought about because we're not thinking too much about the 12-team playoff and how it works just yet. So conference champions are going to be ranked lower than at-large teams, but in the end get better seeds and buys in the tournament. And it's going to be nuts, and people are not going to like it because imagine the Big 12 champ. Let's say my Jayhawks win the Big 12.
Mm-hmm.
Utah, Arizona, or Oklahoma State, whoever it is, they're getting a top 4 seed over, say, Georgia of this past season, who did not win the SEC, but we all know they were an excellent team. Same with the ACC champ. So in last year's sim, Florida State actually gets what they deserve, even with the quarterback injury. They would be a top 4 seed, and they would get a bye in the 12-team playoff because they were undefeated and won the ACC based on the rankings. So I'm not okay. So this past season, Arizona, so if you ran the simulation for this past season, like I said, right, Florida State's in there. Arizona is actually the Big 12 champ. And so Arizona would have a bye in the stupid tournament. I'm not really sure how, because Washington wouldn't, because, again, they're in the Big 10, so they're simulating this based on 2024 conference affiliation. So I'm not sure how they would have handled Washington and Michigan both being undefeated in the Big 10. But nonetheless, lesser teams are going to get the bye. Oh, and Texas would have been the SEC champ. So just note that the way they're going to do this playoff, again, the top 4 highest-ranked conference champions get the buys. So if you run the simulation based off last year, Arizona and Texas as the Big 12 and SEC champs would bump Washington and Alabama, and they would have to go play in the first round. So I just want to prepare you all for that, because internet's gonna have a field day with this, depending on who wins. Well, mainly the Big 12 and probably the ACC.
It does, like, there are parts of it that are going to drive people up the wall, but it does feel like it is a slightly better version than what we'd had before.
Because, no, I'm in, yeah, for sure.
I mean, before there was a lot of like subjectivity to it. It was like, hey, I might think that UW is better than Alabama, but you might think that Alabama is better than UW, and so you'll vote Alabama higher, I'll vote UW higher. Or in some situations, voters would vote up SEC teams, lesser SEC teams, your LSUs, your Ole Misses, so that then they could say later on in the year, like, well, Alabama beat 3 top 10 teams. Yeah, well, that's an Ole Miss team that lost 3 or 4 games, but they were in the top 10 when they played. So I actually don't really have an issue with this. Like, your job is to go out and try and win your conference, and if you win your conference, you should be rewarded for that. I'm totally okay with that.
Yeah, they're definitely emphasizing conference championship, and I too am okay with that. I think it makes those conference races more meaningful. At the same time, we all know in college football that there are several teams who do not win their league. I mean, look, the issue here is that the Big Ten and the SEC are so strong now, and the ACC and the Big 12 are not, that there are obviously going to be teams that do not win the Big Ten and the SEC that are going to be infinitely better than perhaps even the champion of the Big Ten or the ACC, depending on who it is. So the question is, do you like that they are going to that they do highlight and emphasize winning a conference championship to get the bye, or would you rather just have it be by the rankings? I could see both sides of the argument, but I'm with you in a general sense that I think that it is good that you place a emphasis on conference championship. It's just that the Big 12 as a conference is not even close anymore to the SEC. Like, it's not even close. So you're saying that whoever wins the Big 12 is going to jump a team that may not win the SEC but only has 1 loss. And, I mean, it's like I said, last year's example is Arizona jumping in over Alabama.
Right. Well, and one team would jump in over UW probably because it was
exactly.
big. It was
Texas.
2 Big Tens and 2 SECs, right?
So I don't know. Again, I don't know. Somebody texted in, and I'm totally with them. They said I'm here for all the chaos. Correct. Right. But this is going to get controversial when it first happens. And they said, and I was reading the quotes of the playoff management committee, and they were in there talking about it, saying, hey, this is not a surprise. We knew we set it up like this for a reason. We value conference championships. But I don't think the thing they saw coming was how unbalanced these 4 leagues are now.
Right, but I mean, it won't be this way always. Like, there are going to be some years where the SEC has the 3 best teams just because of the way recruiting got handled, the way that coaches went through, the way injuries went through. There are going to be some years where maybe the Big Ten, there's going to be years where it's more even, right?
Well, sure. But would you want those 3, if there is a year where you have the 3 best teams are in the SEC, would you want those 3 to be 3 of the 4 buys?
No, because again, I think it can be subjective. Okay. I really do. Like, unless you told me that they all 3 beat each other and it was some like round robin type deal, then yeah, I think a way of keeping the regular season important, which is a big thing that they harp on in college football, is making conference championships matter.
Tend to agree.
Because there'd be nothing worse than, let's say we have another year like this year, where a team like Florida State goes out and they win every game set in front of them. They take care of business. You ask them to go on the road and go play a tough non-conference schedule, they do that. They go out and they beat a Clemson on the road. They go out and beat Notre Dame. They go and win these big games, and then their star quarterback gets hurt, so now they're the 12 seed and they have to go on the road. Like, yeah, the injury sucks, and yeah, it's probably going to stop them from winning a national championship, but they took care of business in the lead up to that, and I do think that deserves to be rewarded.
Yeah, I mean, I think that on the very surface, you're at least getting the right teams in the tournament. We're only arguing about seeding, which is way better than the situation last year where Florida State didn't even make it. So yes, we're already ahead of schedule there, and somebody said, plenty of bad teams win their conference and make it to the NCAA tournament, the basketball tournament, and this is no different. And that is right. And I'm not saying there's going to be a bad team in the top 12. There probably won't be. I mean, I don't think you can be a bad team and win these leagues or be the group of 5 representative. Those aren't bad teams. Now, are they elite? No, some of them, but you're right. Every year is going to be different. And the reality is, if you're really one of the best teams, win the games in front of you, regardless of your seed, much like we say in the NCAA tournament. And ultimately, let's go back to the main point, and I agree with you, conference championship, the races for conference championships are going to be really heated because, man, think of the Big 12. If it's Oklahoma State and Arizona coming down to the wire, that is for, if it's for the league title, that is for the Big 12 championship game, that is for a top 4 seed.
Yeah.
That is a significant factor for a team like that in a 12-team tournament that isn't named, you know, Georgia or loaded like Michigan.
Because there was a fear that that would make those games not matter, and you'd see teams, you know, not tank, but hey, you know what? It's close. We might not play our best player today. He's a little banged up. Let's let him have 2 weeks of rest.
And the other thing, too, is somebody mentions Vancouver Ford text line, 503-864-6326. It really doesn't matter for college football because the best teams will always mostly win. So maybe this helps kind of level the field, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like if Georgia is really one of the best teams, he's right. They probably will win. But making them go play an extra game because they didn't win their league, that's fair.
100%. I wonder also,
not unfair.
Maybe this is a simplistic view, but maybe this is a way of stopping, you know, the 2 super conferences from being formed. Because if you're like Florida State right now and you're looking at the ACC, or you're Arizona or Utah and you're in the Big 12, like, unless there's a much greater amount of money being offered to you, why would you go to the Big 10? You're telling me I can sit here, be the big dog in the Big 12, and if I win my conference championship, I'm more than likely going to get a bye every single year? Why would I leave my conference? And maybe that's just a simplistic view from my point of view, where winning is what matters the most, and I don't always think about the money side of it because I'm not an athletic admin. But maybe that's a way of delaying or stopping the 2, every team going to the SEC or the Big 10.
As for the Beavs and Cougs, they will be treated as independents, but you guys already knew that. So they will never get a top 4 seed, but in order to make the tournament, they have to be in the top 12 of the rankings. All right, coming up next, let's get to a few sports snorts before we hit in the news. It is 4:21 on The Fan.
A surprise at the NFL Draft.